There are a few people in the audience I would like to recognize. Former U.S. Representative Elton Gallegly and his wife Janice. Internationally known award-winning journalist, producer, New York Times bestselling author, and Fox News contributor and editorial advisor, Raymond Arroyo. There he is. Producer of the Reagan movie, Mark Joseph. Director of the Reagan movie, Sean McNamara, and his son, Seamus, who has a birthday today. Let's give a hand to Seamus. More broadly, there are several members of the Reagan movie's cast and crew in the audience. Let's give them all a big hand of applause. We are in for a very special evening. From small-town roots to the glitter of Hollywood and then on to commanding the world stage, the Reagan movie is a cinematic journey of a man overcoming the odds, exercising tremendous leadership, and achieving remarkable results as America's 40th president. The story is told through the voice of Viktor Petrovich, a former KGB agent whose life becomes inextricably linked with Ronald Reagan's when Reagan first caught the Soviets' attention as an actor in Hollywood. The movie was not a Reagan Foundation project. However, we are really excited to have a conversation with members of the cast and play a handful of clips from the film. In a moment, we're going to be joined on stage by the following four cast members. I ask that you please hold your applause until they join us on stage. So first, of course, is Dennis Quaid, an Emmy and two-time Golden Globe nominee, best known for his roles in movies such as The Rookie, The Day After Tomorrow, The Parent Trap, and many, many more. A household name, his work has spanned multiple generations of beloved films. In addition to acting, Dennis is also a musician, releasing multiple albums, and he is currently promoting a new gospel album titled Fallen, a gospel record for sinners. And since we're all sinners, it's an album for everybody. So there we go. Dennis said that playing Ronald Reagan was one of the greatest honors of his life, and he was inspired by the many parallels each of them had in their lives. Next, Ilya Baskin attended Moscow's prestigious Theater and Variety Arts College and has built a considerable career in TV and film. He is also a regular on the long-running internet program Outlaw Radio, where he makes amusing commentary on contemporary topics. Next, Amanda Righetti moved to Los Angeles at age 18 and a year later was cast on the hit The O.C. When Warner Brothers and Peter Roth recognized her talent. After being part of the O.C.'s success, Righetti is known for many television and film roles, including in North Shore, The Mentalist, Chicago Fire, and Captain America: The First Avenger. And then we have Will Wallace, who has acted in, produced, written, and directed numerous award-winning films, including The Thin Red Line, I Am Sam, Rules of Engagement, and Broke Sky, for which he received a Best Actor nomination from San Fran Indie Fest. Will has also played roles on such shows as Beverly Hills 90210 and Baywatch. Pretty cool. So with that, I ask you to join me in warmly welcoming to the stage the cast members of the Reagan movie. Welcome. You're right here, Dennis. Well, I'm gonna start with Dennis, of course. And Dennis, you said publicly years ago that Ronald Reagan was your favorite president. So how did you come to that assessment, and what drew you to the role of playing Ronald Reagan?
Well, I was aware of Ronald Reagan from when I was driving down to Galveston from Houston as a boy, and my dad was listening to the speech on the radio, and he was pounding the dash and saying, "Yeah, Ronnie, yeah," and that was as first politically. I also remember him from selling Baraxo soap on Death Valley days, and the GE Theater, and but when it came time to vote, I voted for Ronald Reagan. I went home in Los Angeles. My roommate said, "Who'd you vote for?" I said, "Reagan." He said, "You are kicked out of the hippies." So I turned in my hippie card, which I never really had anyway. And he was my favorite president.
Well, you mentioned in the speech, that's a reference, I assume, to the 1964 Time for Choosing speech. That was this breakout speech that had him really burst out onto the political scene. So you were just randomly in the car with your dad listening to the radio.
Yep.
Wow.
That was it. I mean, that was kind of my introduction to the political world, about, I could see how he inspired my dad. And my dad was Reagan was his hero. And I remember, even in talking with him, I think it was in '72, and he was saying, "We need Ronald Reagan." And he was right.
He was an early adopter, right?
Yes.
Sounds like, until you
oh,
said
yeah,
tech
he was
vernacular.
there all the way.
So is it maybe because of that and these formative experiences relatively early in your life that caused you to say, a few years ago, you said publicly that a shiver of fear went up your spine at the prospect of playing Ronald Reagan? You're a highly accomplished actor. You'd actually played Bill Clinton in a movie prior to that, so this is not new territory for you, but why did you have a shiver of fear?
Well, because he was my favorite president, and there's a lot of things. I felt unworthy. I felt why would anybody want me to play Reagan? I don't really look like him, sound like him, and he's really what it is. He's like Muhammad Ali. He's known all over the world. And so everybody's got an opinion of him. And so it's probably fear of being judged too and all that, which is still here, by the way. But usually that shiver of fear, if it goes up my spine, it's usually a sign that I should do that because it's out of my comfort zone. And so it took me a while to say yes, but I went to the Reagan Ranch and drove up that 5 miles of the worst road in California and got up on top. And as soon as I came out onto the clearing there, I felt like, I could feel him as a human being in what he was. I felt he was a humble person, wasn't a rich person, and I could just feel him in all his work up there. And so I said yes.
So how did you approach the physical transformation, or essentially, I had the privilege of seeing an advanced copy of the film. You're playing Ronald Reagan from the time he's in his mid-30s until he's well into his 70s. So how do you, as an actor, how do you approach that?
Well, I was lucky that I had a year that turned into 2 before we shot the movie, and
because of COVID, or
yes, because of COVID, and just a number of things, getting things together to do it. I mean, Mark had Joseph. Was it 2009? You'd been trying to get it together for that, so it was a long journey, and I went to YouTube. YouTube is so great, isn't it, for when it comes to
research.
things like that. Everything is available to you as far as the exterior, how he talks, walks, and that, and footage going back to his time in the movies and the Senate subcommittee, and his voice, of course, is very high, and like all of us when he was young, so had to work on the voice over that period of time, and then map out the transitions, and then he had a crooked smile, and so I said, where does that come from? And I worked from the outside in, but it was really about feeling him. I'm never going to get away. I'm still Dennis Quaid playing Ronald Reagan and the like. We never get away from ourselves, but you have to. I didn't want to connect in a way as as an idol. I wanted, as a human, to what makes people tick. That's the question.
Well, it must be, someone of your acting stature must still have had a real challenge trying to capture some of those iconic lines, right? So there's one clip I'd like to play, probably the most famous line of Ronald Reagan. I would love to hear.
Yeah, and by the way, we just changed it yesterday in our ADR session because I wanted to get it more like the way he said it.
Okay, great. So we're going to show, everybody's here is getting real inside. Wow.
Yeah, one of the advantages was that I'd lived through all of it. And that's the way of those times, those are great times, inspiring times. And what Reagan did, really for all of us, along with all of us, he was like the voice of the American people, I think.
Wow. I want to bring in Will here, and one of the, and to a very early part of the Reagan presidency, and a very consequential moment, and invite some commentary. But to the team in the back, let's go ahead and play clip number 1. So this is a very significant moment in the Reagan presidency, and it comes very early on. So Will, I'll invite you to comment, and then we'll kick it around.
Yeah, such a powerful moment, and I believe is this August 3rd, 1981?
81.
Yeah, and I just think, just to even be a part of that, I was fortunate enough, Mark Joseph was able to set up some time for me to Zoom during COVID with Mr. Meese, so I got to meet him via Zoom and kind of seek his insight. And I think just to be, I mean, when Reagan, it's just, I get.
Well, for those who may not know the full context, President Reagan fired the air traffic controllers who had gone on strike.
Yes.
And Will's character, Ed Meese, who was subsequently became Attorney General, but at the time was a key, longstanding advisor to President Reagan, he's explaining to the president the momentous nature of this decision.
Yes.
And so you get to deliver that. So you're in touch with the actual Ed Meese.
Yes. That's the first real test of his presidency, I think, about how tough he's going to be. In fact, it affected the Soviets.
Absolutely.
That they went, well, he just shut down all the airspace in the United States, and what will he do to us if he does that to his own people?
And further to your point, Ronald Reagan was not only a Union member, but a former Union president.
Right.
So it sent this profound signal of how tough he was.
Yeah.
Really amazing. Well,
Contract's contract.
That's right. Well, I do want to, maybe we'll switch gears. And so let's talk a little bit about the young Ronald Reagan and his mother Nellie Reagan. And Amanda, I'd invite you to just, what was it like preparing to be Ronald Reagan's mom?
They're really big shoes to fill. But there wasn't a lot about Nellie in terms of I think for Dennis, there was plenty on YouTube to search for Ronald Reagan and be able to embody a physical attribute and then work from the outside in. And for Nellie, there wasn't that kind of...
She died in 1962. She was not a public figure.
Correct. So most of my research and most of the things that I found out about her were from Reagan's hand. It was reading his autobiography and some biographies that were written about Reagan and that his mother sort of found her way into the stories. God and Ronald Reagan actually was the most poignant part of the research because that was the most information about her and also really the impact that she had on his life and what she instilled in him as a young boy, he really carried with him for his life.
So what were some of those things? So did you start out with essentially a blank slate? You were going to learn about Nellie Reagan. What did you learn about her, and what was? What came of that?
I learned that she was the youngest of 7 children. Her mother passed when she was 17, and her father had a sort of very estranged relationship, and she fell into the arms of Jack Reagan, and he was a Catholic, she was a Protestant, which was a big no-no back then, and but she stuck with her Protestant roots and raised her children in the faith of God, and really led them with that strong hand and a very strong moral compass. I think she dove into the church world. I don't know if it was a way to escape the hardships of her own life, but she survived influenza of 1918. She almost died, and her faith in God really grew strong, and that was something that she profoundly put upon her children and raised her children with that compass.
I do want to come to the faith element, which is very, very significant in just a moment. But before that, let's play clip number 3. And I'll invite you to tell us what that says about Nellie and what she's trying to instill on a young Ronald Reagan, Dutch Reagan. So let's play clip number 3, please. So tell us about that scene, Amanda. What's going on? How did you approach it? What was embellishment, or what was in the historical record?
So the Reagans moved a lot, and Dutch got picked on a lot, and he was bullied quite often. And I think it got to a point in his life that he was old enough to grow a backbone, and she really sort of helped kick him over that, and to get to that place where he needed to stand up to the bullies in his life that were coming up against him and giving him a hard time. So I don't know. It's a tricky scene. It's a funny thing to walk. It's in love, but it's also a little bit ruthless. So I think my approach was, she was a very loving mother, and so I wanted it to still have it come from a place of love, not from a place of do this or else. Historically, I don't really know what it was. We just sort of filled in the spaces that we could based on what we knew.
Well, one part we know very well was the profound nature of her faith, and I'd like to actually then, in a moment, go to clip number 2, where Ilya's character it features prominently, but it's both you, Amanda, and Ilya. So let's go to clip number 2, and then I'll invite Ilya and Amanda to comment.
But
Amanda, tell us what is Nellie Reagan doing, and then Ilya, tell us who the nature of the character you're portraying there.
I think Nellie is exposing Reagan to Soviet communism. I think ultimately that's the crux of it. And I think back then, Soviet communism was the big bad, right? And I think Reagan, a lot of his presidency was fighting Soviet communism and the darkness that came about with it. The character that is visiting the church at that time, remind me.
Well, Ilya, tell us
Ilya,
about B.E. Kirchman, and tell us who you're portraying there and why it matters so much.
oh, because it's actually happening right now in this country. What's the misinformation that goes around, and when the real people speak out, when people tell the truth, universities and most of the left-wing organizations, they just don't want to deal with those people. They don't listen to them, and that's what my character in this movie was trying to explain to his audience in this church, where young Ronald Reagan for the first time heard that Soviet Union was not the paradise that a couple of famous people were telling Americans, and not only Americans, and Westerners. There was a group of writers that went to the Soviet Union by invitation of Joseph Stalin. There was Herbert Wells, Romain Rolland, Feuchtwanger, very, very well-known writers, and they were treated with like they were kings, with royalty. They were shown Potemkin villages. I don't know if you know what it is. It's during the Tsar time, the General Potemkin was inspecting how peasants lived, and they lived awful lives. But to show the general that they lived, they built special village where everything was just marvelous, and everybody could only dream about life like that. And so that's where the Potemkin village comes. So that's how Stalin, when he invited those writers, treated them. And then when they came back, they started writing that Soviet Union is a paradise, that everybody, the working class is happy, and everybody has everything they need, and which
Workers' paradise.
Huh?
A workers' paradise?
Workers' paradise, right?
So Ilya, you grew up in what was then the Soviet Union.
That's
What would- in Latvia, which
Right.
is now a free country, but at the time was
It
was
was
one of the
part of the Soviet Union, yes.
And when did you come to the United States, and what was your perception of presidents generally and Ronald Reagan specifically?
It's a good question, because I came here in 1976 by the end of the Ford administration, and then the next president was Jimmy Carter, and after about a couple of years living under Jimmy Carter, I started to wonder, did I do a right thing leaving? But then came Ronald Reagan, and it was just, I knew that that was the right thing.
Well, I want to pose to all of you.
Thank you.
As each of you prepared for these your respective roles, what if anything surprised you, or what did you learn? Dennis, I mean, you were very familiar with Ronald Reagan. You grew up with him, but as you went really deep, what surprised you? What did you learn that caught you off guard?
There's so much. I mean, just that clip right there just brought up a lot. That whole thing, freedom is just a generation away from extinction. Mm-hmm. I always went kind of, yeah, to that until recently. And it's true how we have to really guard and hold precious all these gifts that we've gotten from our forefathers, because we can lose them. And that's very real. The other thing, Reagan was fighting communism very early on. From his time, he was an actor who became vice president, then president of the Screen Actors Guild, and he was fighting communists there in the Screen Actors Guild.
And the film very, very compellingly conveys that.
Yes.
Communicates that.
Yeah, but they were trying to take over the guilds and the unions. And for everybody that thought that was a big wives' tale, after the Soviet Union fell, they found all the files, of course, and it was exactly as they said. And he was dedicated to that. And at a time when our country, we're idealistic, we want to be friends with everybody, and we think that, you make a promise and you keep it, and we expect the whole world is like us. But they didn't grow up like us. They don't have the freedoms of us. And we appeased and appeased and appeased the Soviet Union for just about every presidency that I remember in my lifetime. And Reagan was the first to come along and say no. And so many people were afraid, oh, well, we don't want to make them mad and everything because, they're going to attack us. But it took a Cold Warrior like Ronald Reagan to win the Cold War because they respected him.
And at the same time, your portrayal also conveys that he was a happy warrior, right? He wasn't an an angry, abrasive man.
He had a sunny disposition. He liked people, you know, and they liked him. And, you know, it doesn't take a genius to figure out that way of life that people, you know, most of the world was living under, really. And thank God for him. His idea that he formed, even before his presidency, was to bankrupt them. That would be the way to bring down the Soviet Union. And it turned out to be right.
Yeah, the Star Wars, that's what made them bankrupt.
Right.
Yeah.
The Strategic Defense Initiative, and there's a
Right.
whole special exhibition here at the Reagan Library right now about that. So I encourage you to all visit during business hours. Part of the element you just raised about engaging with people, I think also is reflective of the broader, I think, implication of the movie that there's tremendous resonance for today. And in a moment, I want to go to clip number 5. But there are many parallels between the late 70s, early 80s, and today. One of them is how divided we are as a country and how contentious it is. But let's play clip number 5. That is where Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan meet for the first time, and then I'll invite Dennis to comment on that. So, gents, take it away. All right, so tell us a little bit more about that. What went into the scene, and what did your research tell you about that?
Well, that scene actually really happened, and you know, it became where Tip O'Neill was over at the White House a lot more than he had to be. Because they were friends, they would, you know, in advance, you know, try to figure out some kind of compromise and come closer to each other than it's got to be my way or the highway. Compromise is what America was built on. And Reagan had a great way of saying, he would say, just because he disagrees with me about 20% of this issue, that doesn't make him he's not a 20% enemy, he's an 80% friend. And they had a way of coming together. I mean, it's emblematic of the way I wish we could be like, and we still can be, to get back to working together as Americans.
And
Well said. Yeah.
it's important to note that Ronald Reagan never had both houses of Congress in the Republican camp. So to pass anything, he had to bring Democrats on board. And he and Tip O'Neill would duke it out, but at the end of the day, there were major legislative victories that required Democrats coming along.
Yeah, Tip O'Neill was also, besides Nancy, the first person to visit him in the hospital.
Well, let's go to that. That's our last clip, clip
Beautiful.
number 4, and then we'll invite you to comment on that. Clip number 4, please.
Boy, he'll do anything to get that damn tax cut.
So again, for those who may not have the context, this is in the immediate aftermath of President Reagan being shot, less than 80 days into his presidency. So tell us a little bit more about that scene and all. I mean, there's so much in there.
Like I said, he was the first person to come visit him in the White House. I mean, in the hospital, and they prayed together there, and
Democrat and Republican.
Democrat and Republican,
Protestant and Catholic.
Yeah, exactly. And they worked together. After Reagan got shot, he really did believe that his life was no longer his own. That it was God's purpose for him. That was what he was going to work for. And that's what he did. And they, Tip O'Neill really raked him over the coals over Iran-Contra and other things. They were really bitter political enemies, but they kept an open mind about each other. That little 10%, 20% of an open mind that you could learn from the other one, or maybe it's a little bit of a good idea. You know, there's a big saying that Reagan used to say: you can get a lot done in Washington if you don't care who gets credit for it. And I think they worked that way as well.
We actually have a plaque in the gift shop that has that quote. Let's switch it up a little bit. Maybe some lighthearted moments, kind of just filming the movie, just anything to Amanda, Will, Ilya. I mean, just what was your experience like doing a very serious historical film like this?
I feel like I was in a completely separate movie because all my stuff was in the 20s and 30s. So we had all the Model Ts and everything was, the costumes and everything. Well, I mean, I guess you guys were all, your costumes were period piece costumes too, but I felt like the stuff that I got to do was really cool to see all the old cars that they brought in and all the old costumes, and I really enjoyed that. It was really fast and furious. That I think my portion was shot for maybe 10 days.
And where was that, out of curiosity?
It was in Guthrie, Oklahoma. Which I don't know, did you guys film all of it there?
No, we came back here and shot a little bit in the, in Air Force One, which was...
How cool is that?
I had to pinch myself so many times.
So again, for context, you actually were in the plane that President Reagan used as Air Force One, which is maybe 100 or 200 yards from where we're sitting right now.
Yeah, doing a scene with Nancy, Penelope Ann Miller, who was so fantastic in the movie. And I'm wearing Reagan's actual jacket. And, you know, it's very eerie. What a feeling. I mean, I hardly know how to describe that. And then we shot at the Reagan Ranch, and we're doing scenes that happened there, actual events that happened there, and we're standing in the exact place that they happened and doing those scenes that I don't think Ron and Nancy ever imagined.
Well, I'm really glad you mentioned Penelope Ann Miller, because it's been said that one cannot possibly understand Ronald Reagan and the Reagan presidency without understanding the crucial role that Mrs. Nancy Reagan played. So how did you and Penelope work that out, go deep on that?
There wouldn't have been I don't think there would have been a President Ronald Reagan without Nancy. Their love story is central to the movie, and it's central to their lives. The support and the strength that they drew from their love story, and it was a love story. It truly, truly was. You know, I can't begin to say enough about it. And he wrote her love notes every day, and I think he taught, you know, their relationship taught me about like what relationships. An example of one that's like eternal, that works, that's a true love story. You know, you can't manufacture that.
I think the two of you had an amazing connection, I have to say. She was even, I don't know if Penelope was sending out Christmas cards, you and her, Merry Christmas from the Reagan. And
she channeled Nancy. I mean, it was like, wow, even in the lunch line, she was channeling Nancy, you know.
But she was protecting you as well. When Nancy was, when she was on Edwin Meese, I felt the fear of God. She was there.
It really made it so much easier, and her performance is incredible.
Well, as each of you reflects on the film, do any of you care to share a particularly favorite scene, or something that was particularly fun to shoot, or you know, what, Ilya or Will?
I haven't seen the film.
Okay, you'll have to stick around after. How about you?
For me, I just for some reason, the Berkeley riots, being back in the '60s, that was just a really fun day, and very memorable, and just being able to transport in time. Like
so again, for context, when Ronald Reagan was governor,
yes, there
were very significant campus protests. There was unrest. Again, more parallels between that era and this era. So tell us about this scene where Ronald Reagan goes. Tell us.
Well, and I think and that was one of the questions when Mark set up the Zoom with Mr. Meese, I was able to ask about. I think his answers to me seemed more, as you remember on the Zoom, to be answers that were that had time to change over the decades. And I asked him if he could to re-answer the question, his mindset behind the riots at Berkeley back in the late 60s and how it was then, because hindsight's 20/20. But he was gracious in kind of readapting the answer to his question, and so I would try to internalize that mindset rather than his mindset today on it, and whether or not he feels responsible for any of the atrocities based on his decision that he made or not.
I loved that scene. That was one of my favorite scenes.
Yeah,
The Berkeley riots. And it was the California Governor Reagan, There was something about him then, he would wear brown suits and he'd wear them so great.
Yeah.
And, in his 50s, he was like the sheriff in town, Reagan, And at the same time, he has such great humor. He would disarm people with his humor that, the scene where we walked through the crowd of the student protesters who were having a silence in or whatever, they got tape over their mouths or whatever, and he stops at the door and he turns around and goes to them. It just cracked them all up, made them laugh at themselves, It's really, he was really disarming that way, and not many people had that ability.
And the way he was telling jokes, Reagan, the way he was telling jokes,
Yeah.
He was a great performer.
He always opened with a joke. And I think that the other scene was the second debate of I will not, for political purposes, take advantage of my opponent's youth and inexperience, which was, it was set up and you could see it coming, and he was such a great actor I think he was channeling he and Jack Benny definitely stole jokes from each other because he did a Jack Benny. What it made it so funny is that everybody laughed, including Mondale, He's laughing and he knows also that, this election's over. But Reagan said it, and it took a little bit, and then he took the water and sipped the water just to elongate the moment a little bit, a little cagey thing to do there. That was definitely Jack Benny.
Wow. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I also would say that, Sean, you had so much to do, our director here. You were just always on top of it. I was amazed. You were flying around, pulling off a miracle every day or two, and kudos to you on that.
Yes, and it's,
Really?
it is such a timely thing to have this movie now when the country is so divided.
Yeah, while we were making it,
Yeah.
it was like, we don't want this to be a political movie. That's what we thought. And,
How can
I definitely did not want it to come out during an election year. It's going to get lost, or it's this and that, and it's just going to add. Now it came out, and it turns out, what do I know? Because it's the perfect time to bring it out, I think.
Absolutely.
It really is.
It really is.
And again, you could never have predicted this, but the parallels are just so striking. Right? Everything from campus protest to a presidential candidate, or I'm sorry, a president or former president getting shot or getting shot at. I mean, it's really striking. So in a moment, we're going to go to audience questions. And a reminder to the audience that questions end in a question mark. But what I would like to do is maybe a quick lightning round for any of the cast members who'd care to comment. Short statement. Given that we are at the point demographically in this country where about half the population, roughly, has no memory whatsoever of Ronald Reagan because they were simply born at a time where it would have been impossible for them to have a memory of Ronald Reagan. What do people need to know about Ronald Reagan, and what would you like them to come away with from seeing the film?
Well, those born after 1980, they will have a chance to really see what this country was like and what it can still be. And those of us that were born before 1980, we can have a reminder. And I want it to entertain and inspire people. That's what it's for. We go to the movies not to see things, but to feel things. And I hope it's a uniting thing.
Ilya.
And I think he made America great again.
And just to underscore or put some context around that, that actually was a Ronald Reagan campaign slogan in 1980. Make America great again. And
Yeah.
And
It was.
yeah.
I think you summed it up earlier, just when you were talking about the scene with Tip O'Neill and President Reagan, and just Democrat, Republican. I think there's just an amazing amount of hostility between the two parties right now, and I would love, if anything, for people to remember how it was in those days, and to learn from that, and to work together issue by issue, and not be so hung up on just which party you are and what you know.
And personality, yeah.
Yeah, what that means.
I think it's a human story with politics as a backdrop. And what I really appreciate about the film is you see Reagan as a human being. It really touches on the love story between he and Nancy. And I think there's a human element to it that we don't really see in politics. And it avails us the opportunity to see what it was like for him.
And Amanda, to underscore your point, as somebody who watched the film, there's real struggle in his life. You mentioned how they moved around a lot.
He came from
Dad struggled with alcoholism.
big time.
Ronald Reagan, the actor, had some great times and some not so great times, and the movie really exposes the audience to that.
I think so. Yeah, he also, I think he had a lot of failures in his life, and it's the story of being able to get back up on the horse and, you know, ride with that white flag of hope. And I think Reagan really offered that.
Right. So let's go to questions. We have folks with microphones, and we have some hands raised, and we're going to go to the fabulous Phyllis Gorby first, who's sitting in the front row to our mic runners, and then we'll go to Dave Centrella next.
Thank you so much for being here. I really enjoyed the presentation. As you all are very well aware, Hollywood, the media, and the political parties have really, I think, added to the division in this country. I'm wondering if you're expecting, or have you gotten any blowback from Hollywood, anything that you feel might occur once the movie comes out?
Well, there were two attempts to cancel me when I was doing the movie. In fact, you know, I don't know if I would say that was, you know, because of Reagan at the time, but Reagan was like everybody's dad back then, at least for my boomer generation. He was our dad. And that was for better or for worse. If you were for him or, you know, or didn't want to hear his discipline or whatever, wherever you were in the life, you know, back then, he was kind of like the dad of the nation. And so people had very strong feelings, just like they do about their dad. And I find that there are people out there that still carry those strong feelings with them. There's this, overwhelmingly more great feelings than there are, bad memories about him, I think, with people. In fact, a lot of those student protesters and people that were, drop out the society and, drop in and all that, they, in SDS, they wound up on Wall Street and made a whole bunch of money. Became the greatest thing in the world. And Reagan had a slow-acting effect on people. It was, he grew on them as well.
Let's go to back to the front row with Dave Centrella.
Okay, well,
Mike's coming right here.
well, first off, congratulations on just a wonderful movie, wonderful film. So, as you were studying for your roles, what did you learn about the character you're playing that surprised you the most about them?
What surprised me the most was the great communicator. So many people that knew him always remarked that there was a private place in Reagan that you could not penetrate. And that was the challenge for me in playing him, actually, is to get to the human, that was there. And, I think because he was the great communicator or whatever, I think he had to have, there was a private place in him that I think had a lot to do with the relationship he had with his mother and God, but who he was listening to. And it really formed, I think it formed the core of who he was there in that silence, I think.
Any other surprises before?
I was most surprised at the humble beginnings and how economically, how the hardships of the Reagan family and his father being an alcoholic, those were all aspects of him that I never knew about until the film was presented to me. So I actually learned a lot about Reagan through the process of learning about Nellie.
There's some remarkable firsts, right? I mean, he was the first president who had been divorced, right? There's certainly many folks with very privileged backgrounds who become president, but he grew up when money was very tight. Dad struggled with alcoholism.
And I think the alcoholism also affected their ability to live. I mean, they were moving constantly because of the economical hardships on the family. And that was really, I think Jack's contribution to the Reagan family, but Nellie really tried to protect the children from that demon that Jack would have to find at the bottom of a bottle. And I think that made them stronger in some ways, but it also taught the kids really valuable lessons.
Let's go all the way in the back. I see Tricia with a microphone, so please handle it.
Thank you. Born and raised in Soviet Union, I was a student when Cold War was over. In this movie, what did you learn about relationship between Reagan and Gorbachev?
What happened really in that first meeting, starting with that first meeting with them, had never really happened before in a summit, where I was really surprised to learn, because I didn't know this before, about how managed presidents were.
Scripted, even.
Scripted and managed, as far as communicating with another leader. It's like you had to be chaperoned or something. And Reagan, for the first time, invited Gorbachev into the next room and sitting there by the fire, and really just getting to know each other on a very basic level, talking about their mothers, how they'd grown up. And, I think they began to see each other as humans and the human cost of what a nuclear exchange would be, and empathy for each side as part of the equation. And that really surprised me about how personal that it was. And I think it took that. In Iceland, I have to admit, in Iceland, when they got together in Iceland, we all thought there were going to be no more nuclear weapons. And there was something was going to happen there. And I myself, when Reagan walked out, I thought, oh, what? He turned into an old codger or whatever. He got right up to it and he missed his opportunity.
Yeah, so this was the Reykjavik Summit,
Yeah, the
1986,
Reykjavik Summit.
And Ronald Reagan walks out because he is not willing to give up the Strategic Defense Initiative, which Gorbachev desperately wanted.
Even offered to share it with them.
Right. Reagan.
The technology,
yeah.
Offered to share the technology that didn't exist, by the way, at the time.
That's true.
But was willing to play that game. Not a game. It wasn't a game. But he said no to them, and that was where he said no, and walked out. And the Soviets always figured we would cave, that we'd appease, and he didn't. And I think that, didn't know it then, but that was the moment that the Cold War was won.
You certainly have company in that assessment that was an absolutely critical, pivotal moment in the Cold War. I think we have a question somewhere over here. So there we go, right there. Yeah.
Hello, this has been delightful. As an actress who has also been in a political thriller, playing Mary Madeline in Vice, I'm having so much fun listening to you all. And I wanted to ask you, I'm actually a UFO person. Whatever. Reagan saw UFOs, by the way, and I'm married to a professional astrologer. So I'm very curious, as someone who doesn't fit everyone's box, did you bring up any of the more metaphysical or those kinds of things in the film as far as his UFO sighting or his interest in astrology?
We did bring up the preacher who had met with Reagan while he was still governor, and they held hands to pray in a circle, and he had a vision. He started to speak in, I guess you would call it tongues, that he said that you will reside at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, and going into kind of a trance-like state. And so we did deal with that, but it was, I think they were mixed on how, they make a big deal about what that was, but I think they were mixed about how they responded to that. So that was in there. There was other things that, that were in there it's not a complete love letter to Reagan. His response to AIDS at the time that it came upon us was not what it could have been, but then it was, it was about the times that we were in as well, his response to that. And I think he did come around as well with that. And so it's not a complete love letter. He was a human being. And, but I do think he was the greatest president of the 20th century.
We have time for one or two more questions right over here in the front. Oh, let's just wait for the microphone to come. There it is.
Sorry, I just wanted to know how you picked a composer. I worked in the film business for 30 years, and there aren't very many Republicans around.
I think you'd be surprised.
Asked and answered. Who's next? Right over there on the aisle.
Thank you very much. I'm a native California, 70 years. I remember Pat Brown and driving around with my father. And Ronald Reagan, if he were alive today, would he be the kind of person he was back then, championing conservative causes and trying to get California back on the map as a common sense state?
Well, he was all about common sense, wasn't he? I think he invented common sense, if you ask me. That's what he was all about when he came to office. Because, you know, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? It's a very simple question. You know, it's about, like, don't look behind the curtain over there, you know? People can feel it, and that's what he tapped into. He tapped into everyday people, and he just appealed to common sense. And I mean, common sense, the solutions are not as difficult for a lot of things that we choose to put our focus on.
We have a question also near the aisle, right over there.
Hi, have you heard from the Reagan family? And if so, what did they think about the film?
Michael, very supportive. I haven't seen him since actually we shot the film, and but I understand from like way back, like with Mark, really sought out the family, and sought out the library too, you know, to make sure we got Reagan right, that he had a voice, and to because it's very important about the way that he is portrayed. We wanted to get things historically right, emotionally right, and because the truth is a lot mightier. It really is, and wanted it to be authentic more than anything else, because Reagan was so authentic.
Dennis, in a moment, I'm going to ask you to tell the audience when and how they can see the film. But as we close, why should somebody who maybe doesn't know much or anything about Ronald Reagan, maybe that person lives in a blue city or in a blue state, why should they see this film?
Well, there were a lot of Reagan Democrats, too, you know. And it's kind of funny how, in a way, after 40 years, really, even like with Roosevelt, who I consider to be the second greatest president of the 20th century, are really up there. You don't really remember the politics. You remember the deeds and, you know, what we all did as Americans and how we came together. And, you know, Democrats and Republicans were at each other's throat back then, you know, behind each other's backs, you know, doing things and whatever. But the politics fade. And it's amazing how we make peace with the ghosts of the past. And what we remember is the man, and remember the story of us. And, you know, thank God for Ronald Reagan that he came along. I heard it said one time that America deserves the president that they get. It reflects the president reflects what's going on in our society in a way, not the other way around. You know, it's we the people. And so that's why this is such an important election. Everybody really needs to really take a side in this election and not be afraid to talk, and not be able to speak up Because if we don't speak up, you know, freedom can't be gone in a generation, that's for sure. And we need to teach, by speaking up, we teach our young ones how to speak up, not be afraid, and how to converse, and how to argue, and how to work it out. And so, Republican or Democrat, pick a side and vote, and then let's get on with it. Right?
Whether as individuals or as groups, how do people see the film?
Well, they can see the film starting August the 30th, right, Mark? It's open in a whole bunch of theaters. And I'm hoping that this is going to be the biggest baby boomer movie at the theaters since 1987. Go see it in the theaters, really, with an audience and have the experience. You know, you can always watch it on streaming like later on, you know, or the ABC movie of the week.
Well, show business is a business, and,
Yeah.
and if the business does well, there will be more movies like this, right?
Well, that's the idea anyway. But yeah, really, go see it and tell your friends about it, and don't take my word for it. You know, tell your friends about it because you yourself have an opinion of it if you liked it or not, and I think you will. I'm very proud of it. I think we all are, and it's been the honor of my life, and it's become a favorite movie I've ever made, actually. The Right Stuff was my favorite movie before this, but it's just the honor of being able to spend my time just thinking about Reagan every day has been really the honor of my life, I can't tell you. So thank you, people. Thank you so much.
I can't think of a better note to end on. So Dennis, Amanda, Will, Ilya, thank you so much for spending your time here with us.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Please remain seated at your seats as our VIP and our guests leave the building.